So today we are looking at something I've been talking about looking at for quite some time, and that is polling. And in particular, very specific polling on what voters identify themselves as politically. Now, when I was sort of looking for some of this information, I could only find the most recent one that was available to me at that time was 2020. I do realize we are in 2024, but that was the most recent up to date one that I could find. If not, I was having to go back sort of quite later. But as we will find out, when you look at the older ones, um, they are very, very much roughly the same. Very, very much roughly the same. In fact, you actually find out the centrist vote gets bigger. Turns out people identifying as either politically left or right has roughly remained the same, but centrists seem to have gotten a lot larger. And I want to sort of stress this because this often comes up when I've had conversations in the past with sort of other people on the left. We are in an interesting sort of situation when it comes sort of politically, and you've got to look at how the current voting system works. So, how do you get, you know, in power? Well, first of all, you've got to get your MPs elected. They're the ones who make up the government. Once you have a certain number, you are in the majority. You then get to say, we are in the majority. We can sort of be the ones to form the government. Now, that becomes very, very difficult because you have to think, how is that distribution spread across all the UK? You know, not everyone is going to be sort of, focused in one particular area or in one particular constituency. So this is where you've seen, as we said, every single time the Greens go, oh my word, look at how amazing we've done at the local elections. And then you roll on to the next general election and it doesn't really work out for them, shall we say, because of that that geographical distribution that always massively negatively affects any and all parties. And in particular, if you are sort of aligning yourself in this direction, then it becomes even more harder to try and say, well, the left should, vote X, Y, or this Y, or etc. Hence why tactical voting becomes very much more important, especially if you want to defeat a particular party. But one of the things we're going to look today is that the number of centrists that are out there, and why it is important to say, to look at these people, how you can attract more centrists, and why attracting centrists is your path to victory. Like it or not, that's how, ultimately you win elections. You sort of win them from the center. And this graph in particular, again, this comes from 2020. That's the only one I could find. If people do have others that they are, from sooner, I won't be surprised if it sort of mirrors and matches this one. But this is from Ipsos, so it's a very sort of well-regarded sort of pollster. So yeah, I can sort of trust this data more than sort of any other. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are more out there. But this was sort of the one that I could sort of find, and it's also quite a good visual representation one as well. So we're going to go on into this and have a talk about centrists, but also well worth pointing out the fact that someone will bring it up in the chat. When you look at policy, what people want as policy, we in the UK do overwhelmingly vote for progressive policy. So just because we are now having to attract, centrists does not mean that we have to give up progressive policy, because guess what? Turns out a lot of those centrists do want progressive policy, even some on the right as well. As shocking as that might be, that does seem to be the case. Like I say, that's a whole completely different graph and chart to sort of look at. Maybe we'll have a dig into that at some point in the future. But for the time being, we're going to sort of go digging into this and have a look at this. And, just like Dr. Strangelove, how I stopped worrying and learned to love the bomb, time for us to sort of stop worrying and learn to love the centrists. But anyway, as always, let's crack on into this then, shall we? But before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Of course, down below there's the Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club down below as well. So hang on, we might need to go to this just so you can see it a bit more. So as you can see, this comes from Ipsos. So this is polling on how voters identify politically, present challenges and opportunities for Labour. And of course, this was done back in 2020. Very much, of course, height of pandemic. But this is what you get. This is it. So as you can see here, where do people and parties stand? And you're looking at the top one here with yourself. So when they ask these people, yourself, what do you identify as? You got 24% of people identifying as left wing in the red, 34% identified as center. That's a big lot of centrists out there. And then right wing, 25% identified as right wingers. So, regardless of any election, if you were to just put right now left to right in a direct competition and you ignored the centrists, the left loses by about 1%. If you went head to head, that will be the case. Now, unfortunately, I've really said this before, that it would worry me if we ever got into a sort of a situation where we actually got PR, because what you are sort of seeing here is the reality of what a UK PR system would also be. A centrist party, and particular centrist right, a centrist, leaning parties would ultimately be the bigger dominating parties. As you can see, 34% of people who responded to this identified as centrists. So this would mean for any real, left-wing party to sort of win or gain a majority, two things would either have to happen. Either A, they would have to abandon more sort of extreme, I don't know what you would call sort of extreme left-wing policies, but they would have to maybe back off on some of like, maybe back off socialism, as sort of a concept completely, although there are plenty of policies you can advocate for, which you can sort of drop the socialist label but still advocate for. That does seem to work a lot. That is one of the other interesting things when you look at sort of progressive policy. If you say, oh, this is a socialist policy, people are like, yeah. But the second you drop the socialist label, people are like, oh, actually, that's quite a good idea. So something to bear in mind for the potential future. But any sort of policy or any sort of PR system we potentially get, you are looking at centrist parties being the dominant one. And if you want an example, look what happened recently in Poland. Poland had been really dominated for at least the past decade by a very sort of far right party. Which party and which alliance came together ultimately to defeat that party? Ultimately, it was one of centrists and the left that came together, more so for the centrists. And it was centrists that slowly over time really drifted away and realized actually this right wing party really isn't for us. We're backing off from it as well. So they came sort of more back to the sort of being sort of centrist rather than right wing. Ultimately, this was an alliance that ultimately delivered a defeat to the right wing. Ultimately, that is an alliance that has so far proven to be quite stable and seems to be quite long lasting, fingers crossed, etc. Touch wood for all the Polish out there. But if we got this in sort of the UK, you can now see that it would ultimately be the centrists who would be the power makers here. Potentially, maybe the Lib Dems, maybe not. Maybe there could be another party that could particularly come forward and take that mantle. It's a likelihood, but this is the reality that we are now currently living in the UK. This is something that a lot of people, shall we say, on my left side, can't seem to sort of sort of swallow that it is sort of centrists who we've got to work with, we've got to sort of get on with, and sort of, work together with if we are to sort of get into power and to affect proper progressive policy changes. This is something that we are probably ultimately going to see in the next parliament of leftists and these centrists and center left people getting together and really looking how can we affect progressive change. That is what is going to have to happen. It's going to have to be a lot of alliances. There are some people that are going to have to maybe not like, on like follow stuff on principle, but that particular grouping in the next parliament is going to have to really learn to fight its battles, pick its battles where it can win, and go, okay, we're not going to, willing to die on this hill for this particular policies because there are future battles to come where we might be able to get more concessions or maybe even win on some of these sort of arguments. Make no mistake, in the next parliament and the next one after, there will be a lot of talk about sort of progressive policies and how we can achieve those. And always remember that right now, that 25% of the right voting people there, you can see in this poll, a lot of them aren't voting Labour. A lot of them are staying home. They can't bring themselves to vote for the current Conservative Party. A lot of people who used to vote for the Conservative Party were centrists, but they've now been put off by the direction of travel from the Conservative Party, meaning that now they are now more open to voting for Labour. This is something that we've seen. A lot of people I know have really sort of disagreed with, like, Keir Starmer's sort of stances and his new sort of pledges that he's put out there. Most of them are actually, quite good, especially the energy one. Hey, if you want to keep that in public ownership, then guess what? Who are the people who are going to privatize it? It's going to be the Tories. So that means if you want to keep that in continuing public ownership, if you want that type of sort of nationalized owned company to start investing in green technology, in wind farms, in solar, in geothermal, etc., then it's the Labour Party is the way to go to keep that sort of nationalized. Now, ultimately, as I said, this does come to sort of the reality of the situation that we are in, and that we are, as much as I would love to sort of really go and pursue a lot of policy, we've really got to sort of start winning a lot of people on the center over to progressive policy. We do have a lot of polls which does show centrists and the people in the UK are very sort of progressive. They want a lot of progressive things. So we are going to have to start really deploying these arguments and the policies that we want to see in the future. So ultimately, that is down the line at the moment, because the next big task is, as I have said, is breaking the Tories, especially at the next general election, which could be whenever at this point. I mean, it certainly does feel like Rishi Sunak gave his opening general election pitch and sort of kicked off this race. And I think that's what prompted Starmer to put out his stuff as well, trying to sort of potentially anticipate, well, maybe Rishi Sunak might go for a quick dash and go for, well, there's going to be election in what I think the shortest you can have it is 4 to 5 weeks. I think maybe 6 weeks at the most, maybe. And I think that's what Starmer's maybe done, sort of deploying those new policy pledges that he's put forward recently. But we'll see what happens, of course. Who knows when the next general election is going to be? Honestly, it's like trying to predict when the next bus is going to come along, honestly. But as always, thank you very much. Let me know what you think down below in the chat. I'm always interested to know. If anyone ever wants to sort of come on and have a conversation with me about this, about sort of this polling or stuff like that, I am more than happy to sort of have people come on here. Like I say, I use StreamYard. You can sort of stream onto your channel as well if you use StreamYard as well. Or you can create a free account and you can sort of piggyback off my account and sort of stream to your own one as well. So hey, it's all good. It's all gravy. There is a link down below for StreamYard if you want to try it out. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time. Don't forget to click the like and share button on your way out. And of course, we'll see you all very soon.